with takbir of tahrima, should it be said louder or should it be said quieter? Everyone agrees Imam should say loudly, Allahu Akbar, so people can hear him, right? But what about others behind Imam? Should they say loudly or should they say quietly? Malikis, their preference is that everyone should say Takbir Tahrima loud. I had maybe a couple of weeks ago, we are in Asr Salah, I believe it was Asr Salah. One person comes in just as I was about to make ruku, leading Salah, and he comes in, he goes, Allahu Akbar. It was so confusing for the people. I think people need to be careful. Saying loud doesn't mean you overtake the Imam. But initially, it bothered me. I said, what is wrong with this guy? But I am sure he is from the view that which says the takbir, the harima should be loud for everyone. But this is only one view. All the other madhahib, their view is that only Imam should say loudly, others should not say it loudly. The ma'moom, they do not need to say loudly. But as for the Maliki madhab, they say the Imam and the ma'moom and the one who's praying alone, regardless, if you start, it should be Allahu Akbar, at least loudly. Okay? Which is not, the other three madhahib, they say there is no need for that. There is no need for that. And the people behind Imam do not need to raise their voice. The only time a person should raise their voice behind Imam is for tabligh. If it's a big congregation and the voice of Imam doesn't reach, then someone says Allahu Akbar loud, not just the first takbir, all of them. That's fine. But for a whole congregation to shout Allahu Akbar is accepted by one view, but the other view is to not say loudly. Okay. As for raising the hands, the Shafi'is and Hanbalis, their view is that a person should raise his hand when saying takbir, entering the salah, and then when going to ruku, and then when raising up from ruku, Sami Allahu liman hamida. These three places. And then only after raising from the first tashahhud, he should raise his hand. That's the four places. Entering the salah, going for ruku, coming up from ruku, and coming up from the first tashahhud. If you are praying 3 rakats or 4 rakats after first tashahhud, going into sajda or coming from sajda, there is no raising of hands. This view is the Shafi'i and Hanbali view. Malikis and Hanafis, they say there is no Raf'ul Yadain after the first entering the salah. There is no Raf'ul Yadain. Malikis, the main fatwa of the madhab is that there is no Raf'ul Yadain, but there are some Malikis that they do say there is. Okay, but in general, Imam Malik view was that there is no Raf'ul Yadain, except for Qunut or Eidain. We're talking in a normal salah. And a person needs, to be honest, this is if it's a sunnah in takbir of tahrima, right? And at best is a sunnah in the other takbirs. If the one does it, he can't think of it any more than a sunnah. And if one is convinced that it's a sunnah, then he should do it. And if one is convinced that it is not a sunnah, then he shouldn't do it. No one can disagree that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has done it. No one can disagree. going to ruku, coming up from ruku, no one can disagree ever. The Prophet ﷺ has done it. The number of ahadith and the sahih narration on Raf'ul Yadain are so many that no one in the right mind can deny that that happened. But what is the issue? The issue is, for example, Ahnaf, they say that hukum was definitely there, but it's mansukh. It's been abrogated. This is the Hanafi view. And the others, their view is Abu Bakr has done it, Umar has done it, Uthman, Ali, they've all done it. In the time of all Khulafa Rashidin it was done. So it's not mansukh. And there are many Sahaba, many Sahaba, some have counted, between 20, 30 famous Sahaba of doing it. So someone saying, I don't believe it happened, obviously that's a complete ignorance. And if someone think this is the way I want to follow, that's his right. And if someone follows the view that, and if he is convinced that the view that not to do it like the Malikis or Hanafis, if that's the way, okay. It's not something we should fight about. I don't know, out of all the issues and all the fara'id and wajibat and sunan, why this becomes such a people are attracted to this issue more than anything else. So Ahnaf, they said what? They said it's mansukh. Reason being, they say Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to do Raf'ul Yadain, and towards the end of his life he didn't do it. Okay? Because most of the fiqh of Ahnaf, because Imam Abu Hanifa was in Kufa, and their fiqh comes from Ibn Mas'ud, and they take Ibn Mas'ud over any fiqh, any hadith. If something comes from Ibn Mas'ud, imagine the people of Kufa, the scholars of Kufa, if they took from Ibn Mas'ud, and then someone comes from Sahih narration from other Sahabi, doesn't matter how many times it comes. If they're taking something from Sahabi, and now a non-Sahabi, a student of another Sahabi comes with another narration, they are not going to take his view over something Ibn Mas'ud taught them themselves. And this is proven, the Ibn Mas'ud hadith, that he said, let me teach you Salah. Abu Hanifa, rahmatullah alayh, he narrated from his teacher Hamad, and he narrated from his teacher Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, and he narrated from Alqama, from Ibn Mas'ud, that Ibn Mas'ud said that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to raise his hand in the first takbir, takbiratul ihram, and then he would not do it again. Some people said this hadith is da'if, some said this hadith is good. Ahnaf, they are 100% sure this hadith is good. And Imam Tahawi and other who are the main scholars of Ahnaf, they took the hadith from the time of Salaf. They have agreed this hadith to be acceptable. And the people of Kufa, where Imam Abdullah bin Mas'ud was, this hadith was accepted. And then to support their view, they have another hadith of Ibn Mas'ud. He said that أنه قال رفع رسول الله فرفعنا وترك فتركنا. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to raise his hand, so we raised, and when he left it, we left it. Okay. Also, no view can be better than other view. This is not one of those aqidah issues. This is fiqh. If you are sure this is how it is, then you go that way. I am sure if you are convinced to raise your hands or not to raise your hands other than takbiratul ihram, this will not become a problem for you in hereafter, inshallah, if you are sincere. Now, another hadith which is in Muslim as well, Sahih Muslim, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam one day come out and he said to Sahaba, I mentioned that hadith few days ago, Mali arakum rafi aydikum كأنها أذناب خيل شمس, and then he said uskunu fi salah. What is it that I see you raising your hands like they are the tails of disobedient horses. So be calm in your salah. So they say raising of hand in salah is against the calmness. So the view of not raising hand is a better view because the salah should be calm. Others they said, but this talks specifically just before salam. The Ahnaf say, well, salam or not salam, it says fis salah. So as long as you are in salah, it is better not to do it. And the others said, it's got nothing to do with it because so many Sahaba did it. And this causes an issue, like I've said in so many issues. If the issues existed in the time of Salaf, they were better than us, and they could not close the door of that issue. The dispute remained. There is nothing you can do in our time today to close that door. This issue will remain open to people's opinion and preference until Qiyamah. Because if someone could agree on it, it was the people who were better than us. The Salaf could have agreed on it. But if they didn't manage to, and they were more sincere and more knowledgeable, if they didn't manage to agree on this issue, don't try to convince anyone. This is and because if you look at the other side, Sahih hadith are many. For example, a hadith which is muttafaqun alayh hadith of Ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, say, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, إذا قام إلى الصلاة, when he stood for salah, رفع يديه حتى يكون بحذو منكبيه ثم يكبر. He would raise his hand up to his shoulder, ثم يكبر. This view is more like a Ahnaf view. He raised his hand, ثم يكبر, then he says takbir. But he raised his hand up to his shoulder, then he says takbir. فَإِذَا أَرَادَ أَن يَرْكَعَ, when he decided to do ruku, when he wanted to do ruku, رَفَعَهُمَا مِثْلَ ذَلِكَ, then he raised his both hands like the first time. Then وَإِذَا رَفَعَ رَأْسَهُ مِنَ الرُّكُوعِ, when he stood up from ruku, رَفَعَهُمَا كَذَلِكَ أيضا, then he raised the both hands same way. وَقَالَ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَ, and then he says سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَ رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ. Another hadith also in Bukhari which says when he stood up after the first tashahhud, he raised his hand. The authenticity of the hadith of raising the hands is undeniable. No one in the world can deny them. But those who don't take it, like Imam Malik said, I do not know Raf'ul Yadain except in the beginning of Salah. He lived in Medina. He said, I don't know of raising of hand except in the beginning of Salah. That's one of the famous view of one of his most famous student of Imam Malik. Other students of Imam Malik, they have narrated that later in his life he did do it. So that's why in the madhab you find both. Some people do it, but most mashhur in the madhab is they don't do it. But it doesn't mean that you say, well, Imam Malik is not knowledgeable, or to say Imam Abu Hanifa is not knowledgeable. They have the hadith, they think. Imam Malik, his view is different to Imam Abu Hanifa, but they both conclude they don't want to do it. But Imam Abu Hanifa, he considered it mansukh because of the hadith, رَفَعَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ فَرَفَعْنَا وَتَرَكَ فَتَرَكْنَا. He raised to be raised and he left, we left. Clear? I don't think we need to spend any more time on this issue. Let's go back to our sunnah of raising hands.
Could you repeat that hadith about the donkey? Or not the hadith, sorry. I mentioned that you said of raising the hand is like horses.
Yeah, it's very famous.
Is it a hadith?
Yeah, it's in Sahih Muslim. ما لي أراكم رافي أيديكم كأنها أذناب خيل شمس أسكن في الصلاة, something like that. But this will you find in the Bab of Salam. This is when they said for Salam. But because of the word says fi Salah, this is against the calmness and sukoon in Salah. So if it's against in Salah here, then they say it's against in Salah everywhere else. Yeah, and the others would say, well, if it's not in the beginning, it's not in later either. Yeah.